Harris, the Senior Intelligence and National Security Correspondent for the Daily Beast. With us from Melbourne is Sarah Joseph. She's Director of the Castan Centre for Human Rights Law at Monash University. Also with us on set is Fred Fleitz, Senior Vice President for Policy and Programs at the Centre for Security Policy. And from Toronto, Haroon Siddiqui, a journalist and former columnist for the Toronto Star. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Shane, let me start with you. Quite a few developments today. We had, or at least over the past few days, we've had the Patriot Act expiring. Now we have new legislation in the guise of the USA Freedom Act. What do you make of it?
Well, I think what you saw here was, interestingly, Rand Paul and also Mitch McConnell kind of maybe coming out, two of the big political losers. Mitch McConnell, of course, being the Senate Majority Leader. Paul tried to shut this debate down, ultimately was rebuffed by his own party and other senators who wanted to go forward and vote on this USA Freedom Act. And McConnell also at the last minute today tried to introduce a number of amendments that House lawmakers said, you're just watering down this bill. If you do this, all bets are off and the Patriot Act will stay dead. Ultimately, enough members came over to the other side to vote for this legislation. So it was this really tense and rare sort of drama between both houses of Congress, and we end up with a series of surveillance tools that look pretty much like they did before this debate began, with some significant modifications to this call records program, as your correspondent was saying.
Fred, what is your view on the passing of this act? I guess what the legislators were trying to do here was to strike some kind of balance between maintaining a surveillance capability and at the same time keeping American privacy rights in place. Did they succeed, do you think?
Well, my view as a former intelligence officer, I was with the CIA for 19 years and a member of the House Intelligence Committee staff, I think this is a sad day for America. I think a key counterterrorism tool has been weakened because of the hysteria caused by Edward Snowden. I mean, I know from my experience these programs have been carefully monitored by the Senate and House Intelligence Committees. But the hysteria of so much intelligence, so much information about classified programs being leaked all at once out of context, I think created a situation where it was impossible to defend this program. A lot of people are at fault. President Obama didn't defend it, members of the Senate and House didn't defend it, and I don't think the intelligence committees defended it. I can live with the USA Freedom Act, but I'm very sorry due to the threat from ISIS that this key counterterrorism tool has been weakened.
Right, and of course this kind of legislation is not unique to the United States. Other countries, allies of the United States, have also passed laws to monitor their citizens, to monitor what is going on in their communities. Let's go to Australia. And the Australian Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, he recently spoke about terrorism in the country. Let's listen first to what he had to say.
The actions of our police and intelligence agencies have averted 6 terrorist attacks. Already, the Parliament has passed new laws to strengthen police powers, including laws on metadata, and the government has boosted funding for our counter-terrorism agencies. But despite these efforts, Australia faces a growing challenge from foreign fighters and from homegrown terrorists.
Sarah, what do you make of Tony Abbott's plan to fight terrorism? Are Australians seeing this as reasonable or is it extreme?
I think that national security happens to be a perceived strength for this government. It's interesting, there's been a lot of debate in our papers, in our newspapers recently about the many new measures that have been introduced. It's interesting we hear the Prime Minister say that 6 terrorist attacks have been thwarted. I would like people to remember that in fact there are legal proceedings to go on, so we don't really know the details there. But all of those thwartings, if you like, or alleged thwartings, occurred before this rash of new legislation, including metadata collection. There is a feeling amongst some parts of the press, and that would include myself, I'm not part of the press, but I am a commentator in this area, that the government seems to be ramping up terrorist measures and sort of, coming out with sort of announceables every now and then, accompanied by many, many Australian flags, which, helps to give the impression that there is very, very serious danger in this country. Now, I don't deny that there is a terrorist threat, but I think there is a need, both in this country and perhaps in the United States as well, for a real sense of proportion. The reality is that in Australia there have been very, very few terrorist incidents. There have been very, very few fatalities from terrorism. And if we compare it to the government's reaction to other very, very serious criminal issues, it's just not proportionate. A common comment which is made in this country is, for example, that family violence kills one Australian woman a week. In fact, it's more than that at the moment. And yet we see nothing like the resources or reaction in that regard. So I think national security is felt to be a strength for this government. I think it tends to be something that populations rally behind, but I do have serious concerns about some of the proportionality of some of the measures.
Okay, let's look at the situation in Canada. Haroon Siddiqui joins us from Toronto. Haroon, the Canadian government is also introducing anti-terrorism laws. One of the laws they're introducing is known as the C-51 bill. Opponents of that law, people like the Toronto Coalition to Stop Bill C-51, says it is, and I'm quoting here, they say it's intrusive, excessive, regressive, and will curtail democratic rights. Do you believe that to be the case?
That is the case. In fact, that has been the case since 9/11. If you just take the longer view on this thing, what have we heard in the last 10, 13, 14 years is that forever every government is announcing new measures which are curtailing freedoms and democracy and so on. All of this to supposedly stop terrorism. What do terrorists want? We were told what they really want is to derail our democracy. So it's not the terrorists who are derailing democracy, it's our own governments that are busy derailing democracy in the name of fighting terrorism. And as Sarah said, the damage caused by terrorism, at least in Canada and Australia and some of the other countries, is minimal compared to the other kinds of fatalities that people suffer every day and every week. But we have been whipped into fear by our governments. Mr. George Bush was the master of this thing and won a re-election doing so. Other governments have learned the same thing. And we are gullible, and we as a people are likely or more likely these days to give the government whatever power they want. Yeah, keep us safe from the terrorists. Of course, who is for the terrorists? Nobody is for terrorists, but we need to question is this erosion of our democratic rights, privacy, this collection of metadata, and so on and so forth. Is this really proportionate to the threat, as Sarah has just asked? And that is the right question to ask. What's happening in Washington today is political theater. In the end, they'll pass some bill, and the ability of government to conduct mass surveillance will continue. The invasion of privacy continues. Enormous amounts of resources are being handed over to these people, whereas some basic social needs of people and citizens of our countries are being ignored. That's the bigger reality here.
Fred, you're clearly on the other side of this debate. Let me get your view on that. I mean, are civil rights being destroyed? Are rights to privacy being eliminated here by the introduction of these laws?
Well, I know it goes against conventional wisdom, but these programs have been carefully overseen by the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. I have seen this happen. However, I'll concede that there's a contradiction between secret government and secret programs and our conception of democracy. It's a trade-off we have to tolerate due to the threat from radical Islam. Radical Islam is a threat to the United States concerning homegrown terrorism. It's also a severe threat to Australia and Canada. If we lived in a world of free democracies, we wouldn't need programs like that. We don't live in that world. We live in a dangerous world, and regulated intelligence programs like this are needed to protect our security and freedom.
Right. Shane.
That's what we've been told. That's what we've been consistently told since 2001. Massive threat. Islamists are taking over. You know, jihadism is going to happen tomorrow. Let's get a reality check here. These things sound wonderful for right-wing politicians. These things sound wonderful for security establishments and so on, because they can get more powers, ever-increasing powers and so on. They get more budgets. This is a game, in effect, that suits the people who are leading this battle. There is no question there is a threat to terrorism, as Sarah said. There is no question that people want to be protected. But I think what we have done is we have lost a sense of balance.
Okay.
That's the issue here.
Right. Shane, if we look at the situation in the United States, especially with these new laws being passed right now, is the United States Congress out of step with the people of America? Because if we look, there was a survey done by CNN just a day ago, and 6 out of 10 Americans support extending the NSA surveillance powers.
Yeah, if you look at it from that perspective, I would say Congress is not out of step with the American public. And look, We should also note that these are not simply authorities that are embraced by right-wing politicians in this country. Right. President Obama endorses the USA Freedom Act and endorsed keeping Patriot Act tools in place. So this is something that has clearly got bipartisan support.
But they have rolled back some of the more intrusive provisions.
They have rolled back some of them, but also let's remember too that the phone records program that NSA has been running that was revealed by Edward Snowden, I mean, I've talked to intelligence officials about this a lot in the past few weeks. If that is the only program that they have to give up in the panoply of surveillance tools that they have, they consider themselves pretty lucky. It's a database that was not actually used very much and has not necessarily been proven to intervene in terrorist attacks. There are other surveillance authorities that they will much more aggressively cling to. But look, all of these issues that we're talking about and raising here, the issues of whether it's fear-mongering, what is the extent of surveillance versus privacy, all of these issues were on display here in the past 10 days in this debate in the U.S. Congress. And, we can, sort of get distracted by the political theater, and there was a lot of it in this debate. But at the end of the day, all of these issues were argued out, and the democratic process worked. And this is what it looks like when it comes out the other side.
The democratic process works. In the end, you still end up with mass surveillance and so on, and enormous resources being dedicated to it. That's the bigger reality that I'm talking about.
I want to go to Sarah.
And
Sarah,
can I just...
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, I just wanted to make one point, and I think it was made at the beginning of the program. And I mean, we can debate whether the legislative process has worked. I mean, certainly this law has passed through the proper processes. But, would this debate have happened without the revelations from Edward Snowden, which was not an ordinary part of the political process?
Yes.
I think that's a point worth making.
Yeah, I think that's right. This debate would not be happening without those revelations. I mean, at the center of this entire argument was this massive phone records program. Absent the revelation by Snowden, we wouldn't be having that conversation. And every other time that the Patriot Act has come up for renewal, the Senate and the Congress, the House have gladly gone along with it. So absolutely, that is a huge part in this debate.
Okay.